Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty powerful. This idea from Dr. Neil Barnard that we can actually shield our brains from Alzheimer's disease just by making some simple choices in our diet and lifestyle. This quote from Dr. Neil Barnard, it just cuts right to the heart of what Alzheimer's is. It's not just about forgetting things, is it? It's about potentially losing the very essence of who you are. And this is so personal for Dr. Barnard. He actually watched his own father's memory, his personality, just fade away until he was unrecognizable. This disease doesn't just erase what you remember, it can erase the person. So what's actually happening deep inside the brain? Well, on a microscopic level, it gets all cluttered up with these sticky protein clumps. These things, called beta amyloid plaques, they're like little meatballs that just gum up the works. They disrupt that critical communication between our brain cells. Okay, get ready for this number because it's a big one. By the time they're in their mid-80s, about half of all Americans will be affected by Alzheimer's. 50%. And for so long, the story we were told was, well, it's just two things you can't do anything about: getting old and having the wrong genes. But what if that's not the whole story? What if it's not just about old age and bad genes? This one question, this is a huge turning point. It suggests we might have way more control over our brain's future than we ever thought. All right, so let's really get into this. There was this huge study, the Chicago Health and Aging Project, and it started to connect the dots, linking the food we eat every day to our long-term brain health. It really started to challenge that old idea that our genes are our destiny. So there's this one specific gene, APOE epsilon 4, and for a long, long time, if you had this gene, it was seen as a major red flag. People thought it basically meant you were condemned to get the disease. But as it turns out, the story's a bit different. And this is the breakthrough. This is where it gets really interesting, especially for people who have that high-risk gene. When they ate a diet low in those bad fats, saturated and trans fats, their risk of memory problems didn't just go down a little, it plummeted by a whopping 80%. 80! So what does this all mean? It means that genes are not destiny. That's the key takeaway. Your choices, what you eat, how you live, they can act like a powerful override switch for your genetic blueprint. You actually have a say in this. Okay, so if our diet is that powerful, let's talk about what we should be avoiding. Let's really pinpoint the culprits. And the first place to look is at the fats we eat. We're talking about saturated fat here. You know the kind. It's solid when it's at room temperature. Think about bacon grease or a stick of butter. That's the stuff. And what's interesting is, in the average American diet, the number one source isn't meat, like you might think. It's actually dairy products. Meat comes in as a close second. Yeah, the data from that Chicago study, it couldn't be clearer. The people who ate the most of these saturated fats, and also trans fats, the kind you find in a lot of pastries and junk food, they had double, sometimes even triple, the risk of developing Alzheimer's. But hey, it's not just about the fat. There are also metals, excess iron and copper, that can kick off this really destructive chain reaction in the brain. The best way to think about it is like rust on a cast iron pan. That's oxidation. Well, something similar can happen in our brains, creating these little damaging sparks called free radicals. And we can get too much of this stuff from things like old cast iron pans, copper pipes, or even from taking the wrong kinds of vitamin supplements. So if some foods are creating these damaging sparks in our brain, the obvious question is, how do we put out the fire, right? Well, the good news is nature has given us some really powerful answers. And here it is, nature's perfect fire extinguisher for the brain is vitamin E. It's this amazing antioxidant, and what that means is its whole job is to run around your system and just neutralize those destructive little free radicals before they can do any real damage. And the best part? Getting more vitamin E is actually delicious. We're talking about snacking on almonds and sunflower seeds, throwing big handfuls of spinach into your meals, even enjoying sweet things like mangoes. This is such a great example of why getting your nutrients from food is almost always better than from a pill. A typical vitamin E supplement, it only has one of the 8 different forms of the vitamin. But when you eat something like an almond, you get the whole package, all 8 forms, working together exactly how nature designed them to. And it doesn't stop with vitamin E. There's this whole other layer of protection hiding in plain sight in the bright colors of our fruits and vegetables. Those vibrant purples in grapes, the deep blue in blueberries. Those colors come from things called anthocyanins. And they're not just pretty. They're powerful antioxidants that studies have shown can actually improve our memory. So, what's the simple takeaway here? It's to build your meals around this idea of a power plate. Just make these four groups the stars of your show: fruits, veggies, whole grains, and legumes. Beans, lentils, that kind of thing. The more colorful plant based foods on your plate, the better off your brain will be. Okay, but it's not all about food. Protecting your brain goes beyond the kitchen. Regular physical activity has a direct, measurable, and honestly, a pretty amazing impact on your brain's actual structure. This is just incredible. There was research out of the University of Illinois that showed something mind-blowing. A simple, brisk walk didn't just slow down the normal brain shrinkage that happens as we age, it reversed it. The hippocampus, that's the memory center of the brain, it literally got bigger in the people who were walking. It's like they were turning back the clock on their own brains. And the best part is, the plan to get there is so simple. Anyone can do this. You just start with a 10-minute brisk walk 3 times a week. That's it. Then, each week, just add another 5 minutes. You keep going until you hit the goal: 40 minutes, 3 times a week. Super manageable. So let's pull this all together. Here's your checklist, your 5-step plan for protecting your brain. It's simple, it's backed by science, and most importantly, it puts the power to take control of your brain health right back in your hands. And that really brings us full circle, back to Dr. Barnard's story about his dad. The final message is the most powerful one. For his dad, it was too late. But it's not too late for us. It's not too late for you. We can't change the past, but we absolutely have the power to protect our own futures. And it can start with the very next meal you eat and the very next walk you take.